The evening was just like any other. James was sitting alone in his modest flat in the small market town of Ashford, Kent. The television hummed in the background, the news anchor droning on about the fluctuating pound and the latest Brexit updates, while James idly scrolled through his phone. Suddenly his phone buzzed with a call. It was Laura, his wife. "James, I'm bringing a friend home to stay tonight. Hope that's all right." James raised an eyebrow. "A friend to stay over? What, all the hotels in town burned down overnight?" Laura sighed. "Don't start. She had a terrible fight with her husband. Left in tears. You're not a beast, are you? We can put her on the sofa." James shrugged internally but said, "Yeah, sure. Plenty of room." Still, the thought nagged at him. So some other woman sleeping under my roof tonight. This could be interesting. An hour later the doorbell rang. James opened the door and there she was, Emily. Officially, she was the godmother to their youngest, hence their close connection, but James had only seen her a couple of times at family events. Now she stood before him in a long tailored camel coat, her dark hair tumbling loosely over her shoulders, eyes rimmed red from crying but striking all the same. There was a faint trail of spicy, expensive perfume that made James wrinkle his nose, involuntarily leaning in to catch the scent. "Hi," she murmured, voice soft but steady. "Sorry about all this. No worries," James replied, stepping aside. "We're simple folk. There's room enough." Laura immediately took Emily by the hand and led her into the kitchen. "Come on, let's have some tea." James put the kettle on and pulled a bottle of red wine from the fridge. "Thought we might need something stronger than tea to cheer us up." They sat around the small kitchen table, the warm yellow light casting soft shadows. Emily's composure began to thaw as she shared the story. A silly argument, a stubborn husband. James noticed she wasn't the type to curl into a ball and cry quietly. She held his gaze, cracked jokes, even teased him lightly. "So James," she said with a sly smile, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, "you probably drive your wife mad sometimes too." James chuckled. "Saint that I am? If it weren't for me, she'd have gone insane from boredom years ago." Laura laughed and Emily joined in, the sound filling the room. James caught a fleeting moment where Emily's hand lightly brushed his arm as she fixed her hair. Maybe accidental, maybe not. The movement was too smooth, too deliberate to be mere clumsiness. They lingered for an hour and a half. Tea gave way to wine and the conversation grew warmer, easier. James, Laura, and Emily. Just three friends chatting in a quiet kitchen. But in James's mind, a game had already begun. What if Laura got up and said, "I'm off to the shower. You two carry on without me"? What would happen then? He imagined Emily taking a slow sip of wine, eyes locking with his, a slight, knowing smile curling her lips. "You're a good man for letting me stay," she said quietly. James shrugged. "Can't just leave someone out on the street." "Not everyone thinks like that." Silence settled between them, broken only by the soft trickle of water from the sink and the glow of the lamp overhead. James would remember that moment most vividly. Something unspoken hung in the air, impossible to ignore. But that night nothing more happened. Laura returned from the shower, and the three of them continued drinking tea and chatting as if nothing had shifted. Yet James knew something had. It was the first crack. Morning came quietly. Laura left early for the market, promising to return in a couple of hours. James found Emily in the kitchen, dressed down in his oversized gray t-shirt, which hung halfway down her thighs. Her hair was tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Good morning," she said, pouring herself a coffee. James grunted, trying not to stare. "I've been up for 2 hours already," she smiled. "Well, you could have brought me breakfast in bed." James pretended not to hear, but inside he felt a spark ignite. Sitting opposite her, he watched as she cradled the mug with both hands, deliberately stretching the moment. She caught him looking. "What's with the staring?" she teased. James thought, "You're definitely the kind of woman who gets breakfast in bed only on special occasions." "Wrong," she said. "I like it when someone looks after me." He noticed her knee brushing against his under the table. At first he thought it accidental, but she didn't pull away. In fact, the contact grew firmer. The conversation drifted to trivial things, the weather, a TV series, last night's wine, but James caught every little gesture. The way she tucked hair behind her ear, the way her lips bit down gently, and how the t-shirt stretched taut over her form when she leaned forward. Laura returned, and the three of them ate breakfast together, as if nothing was different. But James knew Emily was playing a game. And judging by the way she looked at him, this wasn't just chance. That evening, as they gathered again around the kitchen table, Laura brought out a homemade meat pie. Emily thanked her with a bar of chocolate, and the atmosphere shifted. Emily was more talkative, laughing at James's jokes, her hand lingering a moment too long on his shoulder. Do you often have guests stay over? She asked. Rarely. Only the chosen few, James replied. So I'm lucky then, she said with a grin. Laura went to wash the dishes, leaving James and Emily alone for a brief moment. Leaning closer, Emily whispered, I slept better here than at home. Maybe it's the fresh air, or maybe it's because you were nearby. James nearly choked on his wine. The game was on. Careful with words like that, he said. Might think you're flirting, she smiled. Are you sure that's a bad thing? Laura returned, and Emily instantly masked the moment. But James was already on edge. One thought circled relentlessly. She was doing this deliberately. The question was, how far was she willing to go? Later that night, while Laura slept soundly upstairs, always the first to bed, James and Emily sat quietly, finishing the wine. Emily told a story about her first kiss, laughter filling the room, but the way she looked at James was a clear challenge. Inside, James knew, one more step, and there would be no turning back. When he heard the soft footsteps in the dark 20 minutes later, his heart skipped. Emily appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, wearing the same t-shirt from the morning and a pair of shorts. Can't sleep, she said, opening the fridge. Could you get me some water? James rose, poured a glass, and their fingers brushed lightly. A small touch, but electric in the stillness of the night. It's so quiet here, she murmured, sipping the water. Sometimes too quiet, he replied. She leaned against the counter, eyes fixed on him, closer than necessary. You know what you're doing, don't you? James whispered. And you? She countered, holding his gaze. They stood frozen, the tension between them taut as a drawn bowstring. James inched forward. She didn't pull away. Her breath quickened. The scent of her skin, mixed with perfume and something warm and familiar, clouded his senses. He didn't touch her, only closed the distance enough to feel her heat. She waited, testing, daring. Aren't you scared? James asked. Should I be? She smiled, barely a whisper. Well, if Laura walked in. And if she doesn't? Emily replied smoothly. Something inside James snapped. This wasn't a reckless rush. This was a slow, deliberate seduction. His hand moved to her cheek. She closed her eyes but stayed still. We're making a mistake, he said softly. Maybe, she whispered, but sometimes mistakes are worth it. They stood for a heartbeat longer before she leaned in, lips barely brushing his. The kiss was slow, deliberate, each second stretched, savoring the forbidden. Suddenly a noise upstairs, the faint creak of Laura turning in bed. They froze. Shall we move to the living room? Emily whispered. James nodded. The TV screen glowed faintly in the dark room. He switched it off. Emily's hand slid down his back, warm against his shirt. In the dim light, their hearts thumped loudly, two bodies pressed close, the world outside fading. You know there's no going back, James breathed. I don't want to, she replied, voice steady, filled with promise. He kissed her again, tentatively at first, then with desperate hunger. Her hands found his neck. His slid down her spine. The intoxicating mix of wine, perfume, and warmth overwhelmed him. They sank onto the sofa, Emily straddling him, lips hungry and demanding. Her breaths quickened. His heart raced. She traced his face with gentle hands, then down his neck. He held her tighter, losing himself in the moment. Words were useless. Everything was said in touches, in shared breath and racing pulses. She rested her forehead against his neck. They both gasped for air, as if they'd run a marathon. She started, then faltered. What is it? James asked. I don't know how I'll look at you tomorrow. James grinned tiredly. Let's figure that out when tomorrow comes. They kissed again, the point of no return reached. Her hands gripped his shirt, her body warm and alive against his. The night stretched endlessly, filled with quiet passion and dangerous promise. Eventually, she slipped off, pulling on his t-shirt, and retreated to her room. James sat in the dark, the lingering heat burning through him, knowing nothing would ever be the same. He awoke the next morning to the smell of coffee and soft clinking of cups. Emily was in the kitchen, now dressed in jeans and a cozy sweater, hair tied back, face fresh as if no secret had stained the night. But her eyes betrayed her. The silent conversation of two people who had crossed a forbidden line. Coffee? She offered without looking up. James nodded, taking the cup. Their fingers brushed again, a simple touch reigniting yesterday's fire. Laura, the afternoon sun dipped low over Ashford, casting long shadows through the narrow streets, as James sat in his favorite armchair by the window. The key lay heavy in his palm, cold and unforgiving, a silent provocateur whispering of possibilities he dared not voice aloud. Outside, life moved on. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the park, and the distant chime of a church bell marked the hour. But inside, James's world had narrowed to the weight of that small, unassuming metal object. He glanced toward the kitchen where Laura was bustling about, humming a tune that James didn't recognize. She was dressed casually today, in a loose cream blouse that hinted at the curve of her collarbone and a pair of well-worn jeans that hugged her slender hips just enough to remind him of mornings long past, before the comfort and routine had settled in like a gentle fog. Her auburn hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail, but a few rebellious strands framed her face, softening her sharp cheekbones. James watched her for a moment, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Laura was the kind of woman who could turn the mundane into a dance. The way she moved between the stovetop and the counter, the way her fingers absent-mindedly toyed with a loose thread on her sweater, the little hums and sighs she made when she thought no one was listening. She seemed oblivious to the tension that had settled between them like an unwelcome guest. A sudden knock at the door startled James out of his reverie. He wasn't expecting anyone else today. Opening it, he found Emily standing there, her usual confident smile replaced by something softer, almost vulnerable. She wore a light trench coat over a navy dress that brushed just above her knees, paired with simple ballet flats. Her hair was pulled into a low bun, a few loose tendrils escaping to caress her neck. "Hey," she said softly, holding out a small package wrapped in brown paper. James took the parcel, their fingers brushing briefly, a spark igniting in the cool autumn air. "I thought you might like this," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. James glanced down at the package, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "Open it," she urged, stepping back slightly, a playful glint in her eye. Carefully, James peeled back the paper to reveal a delicate silver necklace, a small key pendant hanging from the chain. It was elegant, understated, but there was something undeniably intimate about it. "It's beautiful," James admitted, looking back up at her. Emily shrugged, cheeks flushing faintly. "I saw it and thought, well, maybe you'd like to carry a little piece of the mystery around with you." James chuckled. "You're full of surprises," she smiled, stepping closer until the space between them was charged with unspoken tension. "I guess we both are." The moment stretched, the air thick with possibility, before Emily broke the silence. "I won't keep you long. Just thought you should know. I'm heading out of town for a while. Some family matters. But I'll be back." James nodded, swallowing the lump forming in his throat. "I'll be here." Emily's eyes flickered toward the window, where Laura was still busy in the kitchen, humming obliviously. "I know," she said softly. "And that's what scares me." Before James could respond, she turned and walked away, her coat billowing behind her like a whispered promise. He closed the door slowly, the weight of the necklace in his hand anchoring him to a reality that suddenly felt both fragile and electrifying back inside. Laura looked up as James re-entered the room, her smile warm but tinged with something he couldn't quite place. "Everything okay?" she asked, wiping her hands on a tea towel. James hesitated, the necklace heavy in his pocket. "Yeah, just someone dropped by." Laura's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing, returning to her cooking as if nothing had changed. That night, James lay awake, the ceiling shadows playing tricks on his mind. The key pendant rested on his bedside table, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. His thoughts spiraled about choices, consequences, and the thin line between desire and disaster. He wondered if Emily's return would mark a new beginning or the start of an end he wasn't ready to face. And somewhere deep inside, the key pulsed with silent promise, waiting for the moment when James would finally decide to unlock the door it belonged to. The following morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical for early November in Ashford. The steady patter of rain against the windowpane echoed James's restless thoughts, as he sat at the kitchen table nursing a lukewarm cup of tea. The key pendant lay beside his plate, its silver surface catching the dim light with a subtle gleam, like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Laura bustled around the room, effortlessly switching between preparing breakfast and tidying up, her casual elegance impossible to ignore. She wore a soft cashmere sweater in muted mauve, sleeves pushed up to reveal slender wrists adorned with a delicate silver bracelet, a gift James had given her years ago. Her dark jeans hugged her hips comfortably, and as she moved, The faintest scent of lavender trailed behind her, blending with the aroma of fresh coffee. James tried to focus on the mundane. The way she sliced the toast with practiced ease, the gentle smile she wore when humming her morning tune, but his mind kept drifting back to the events of the night before. Emily's visit, the necklace, the weight of unspoken promises hanging heavy in the air. "James, you all right?" Laura's voice broke through his reverie that he looked up, meeting her concerned gaze. "Yeah, just thinking." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. A small grounding gesture. "Don't let it get to you," she said softly. "It's just a necklace." James smiled faintly, but inside a storm was brewing. It wasn't just a necklace. It was a symbol. A challenge. A question without an answer. The day unfolded in a series of muted moments. Laura went out to run errands, leaving James alone with his thoughts and the persistent drizzle outside. He wandered through the flat aimlessly, eyes often drawn to the pendant resting on the coffee table. At one point, he found himself staring at the old door leading to the spare room, the one Emily had used during her stay. The key in his palm suddenly felt heavier, almost as if it belonged to that very door. A joke crossed his mind, bitter and dry. What are the odds? A key to temptation's chamber. He chuckled to himself, the sound hollow in the quiet flat. The evening brought a subtle change. Laura returned, tired but cheerful, the scent of rain on her coat mixing with the warmth of the kitchen. They ate dinner together, the conversation light but strained beneath the surface. After Laura retired early as usual, James sat alone in the living room, nursing a glass of the leftover wine from Emily's visit. The pendant gleamed softly in the lamplight. A sudden knock startled him. He wasn't expecting anyone. Opening the door, he found Emily standing there, rain droplets clinging to the hem of her coat. Her eyes sparkled with a mischievous glint, lips curved into a half-smile that sent a jolt through him. "Thought I'd stop by before I leave," she said, voice low and inviting. James stepped aside, heart pounding. "Come in." She entered, shedding her wet coat, revealing the navy dress from before, now slightly damp and clinging to her curves. She moved with an effortless grace, the faint scent of rain mingling with her perfume, intoxicating and familiar. They settled in the living room, the silence thick with anticipation. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me again," Emily said, tracing the rim of her glass with a slender finger. James shook his head. "I didn't know what to expect." She laughed softly. "Neither did I." Their eyes locked, the unspoken tension crackling between them. Suddenly Emily leaned forward, her hand brushing against James's thigh, a deliberate electric touch. "Would you like to know what this key opens?" she whispered. James swallowed hard, the room spinning slightly before he could answer. The distant creak of the bedroom floor announced Laura's return earlier than expected. Emily pulled back instantly, smoothing her dress and standing. "Maybe next time," she said, her voice a tantalizing promise. James watched her leave, the door clicking shut behind her, the rain outside now a gentle murmur against the window. He was left alone with the key, the necklace, and a question that refused to be answered. How far was he willing to go down this path before there was no turning back? The next few days passed in a haze of routine and unease. Ashford streets wore their autumnal cloak of damp leaves and chilly winds, the kind of weather that made people hurry indoors and conversations short. James found himself caught between two worlds, the steady, familiar life he shared with Laura, and the restless electric pull that Emily's presence had ignited. Laura, ever the picture of calm and grace, moved through their home like a quiet storm. She dressed in soft sweaters and tailored coats, her hair usually swept back into a sleek ponytail that revealed the curve of her neck, and the delicate gold hoop earrings she favored. There was something about the way she smiled, warm and effortless, that made James's chest tighten with guilt. Yet, beneath that smile, he sensed a subtle shift, a quiet tension he couldn't yet place. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills and the sky flushed a soft pink, Laura suggested they take a walk through the town's quaint high street. The shops were closing, and the streets were nearly empty, save for the occasional dog walker or couple strolling arm in arm. James agreed, though his mind was elsewhere, tangled in thoughts about Emily and the key she'd left behind. They walked side by side, their footsteps crunching softly on the gravel path, the silence between them both comforting and charged. "James," Laura finally said, her voice low and steady, "I know something's changed. I can feel it." He stopped, turning to face her under the amber glow of the street lamps. Her eyes were clear and searching. "I don't want to lose what we have," she continued, her fingers nervously twisting the scarf around her neck. But I can't pretend I don't notice. James swallowed hard, the weight of his secret pressing like a stone in his chest. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything was fine, but the truth was a tangled web he wasn't ready to unravel. I'm sorry, he whispered. I don't know how to explain. Laura reached out, her hand finding his warm and steady. We'll figure it out. Together. That night, James lay awake long after Laura had fallen asleep, the key pendant resting on his bedside table like a silent challenge. The line between right and wrong blurred, and the thrill of temptation danced just beyond reach. Days later, Emily returned, this time with a different air about her. A mix of urgency and quiet desperation. She showed up at their door unannounced, her eyes dark and serious beneath the soft curls framing her face. I need to talk, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. James led her to the living room, where the shadows cast by the flickering fireplace played tricks on the walls. There's more to this than you know, Emily began, her voice barely above a whisper. My leaving isn't just about family. There are things I can't explain. Not yet. James felt a shiver run down his spine. The mystery deepened. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. Read this, she said, handing it to him. Unfolding the note, James's eyes scanned the hastily scribbled words, a cryptic message hinting at secrets buried beneath the town's surface, whispers of betrayal, hidden alliances, and a past that refused to stay buried. As he read, a sudden noise from upstairs, a door closing softly, made both their heads snap toward the ceiling. We have to be careful, Emily warned. Not everyone wants the truth to come out. The air between them thickened with tension, and James realized he was no longer just a bystander in this unfolding drama. He was a player, caught in a game where the stakes were higher than he could have imagined. The night stretched on, filled with whispered plans and the unspoken promise that nothing would ever be the same. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the key pendant glinted once more, waiting for the moment it would unlock the next secret. The rain had fallen steadily all day, turning Ashford's cobblestone streets slick and reflective beneath the dull glow of the street lamps. Inside the modest flat that James shared with Laura, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. The clock ticked loudly in the living room, its steady rhythm a stark contrast to the racing thoughts in James's mind. Emily had left hours ago, slipping out as quietly as she had arrived, leaving behind a trail of questions and that cryptic note. James sat alone by the fireplace, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, his fingers absently tracing the smooth surface of the silver key pendant resting on the coffee table. The note was folded neatly beside it, the faded ink and hurried scrawl hinting at a story waiting to unfold. He read and reread the words, each line pulling him deeper into a web of mystery that seemed to grow darker with every passing moment. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps on the creaking wooden stairs jolted him from his thoughts. Laura emerged from their bedroom, dressed simply in a pale blue nightgown that brushed just below her knees. The soft fabric clung slightly to her curves, and her bare feet made no sound on the hardwood floor. She paused at the doorway, eyes searching James's face. You've been quiet all evening, she said gently, stepping closer. Is something wrong? James hesitated, the weight of the secret pressing down on him. He wanted to shield her from the storm brewing within, but the truth clawed at his tongue. Emily came by, he finally admitted, voice low. She left this. He gestured toward the note and key. Laura took the items, her brow furrowing as she scanned the message. What is this? James shook his head. I don't know, but it feels like something serious. Something we weren't supposed to see. She looked up, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of concern and resolve. We'll face it together, she said firmly. Whatever this is. James wanted to believe her, wanted to trust in the strength of their bond. But deep down, he knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. As the night deepened, the rain outside softened to a gentle drizzle. The flat was enveloped in a quiet stillness, broken only by the occasional crackle from the fire. James lay awake long after Laura had drifted into sleep, the key pendant clutched tightly in his hand. His mind raced with possibilities. What secret did Emily hold? What had she hinted at with that note? And what choice would he make when the time came to turn the key and unlock the door to the truth? Outside, the streetlights flickered, casting eerie patterns on the wet pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a lone owl hooted, its cry carrying the promise of revelations yet to come. The game was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning.